Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Tommy with District H. I have a whole group with me today. We got obviously Miranda. We have one of our members, Amy Hathaway, long-term member. Then we have CEO and founder of PerformaFuel Nutrition, Devin Ford, who's been a guest on the podcast and on the YouTube channel before. And today we're excited because Devin's actually going to be headed down here at the end of August to run a seminar focusing on two different things. In this episode, we're going to talk specifically about genomics and kind of the evolution of nutrition, where he's kind of taken it within his own business. And then Miranda and Amy have actually done a genomics test and learned a bunch about themselves. And we'll go into kind of how they've adjusted their life based on this process. So Devin, just to kind of kick things off, talk a little bit about what genomics is at like a 30,000 foot view and how it's kind of evolved over the last 5 years.
Awesome. I love condensing all these definitions. So genomics is essentially the uncovering of your DNA. So inside every cell is a nucleus, or the center of that cell, and inside that there's DNA. In that DNA, it's the instructions of that cell. So it carries out its functions in the body based off what the DNA tells it to do. Now, genomics is the study of different genetic variants that vary person to person, that then change their unique biochemistry and give their cells different jobs or functions that somebody else may have. Essentially, the DNA and the genes are why we're different from one another. And that doesn't just stop at hair color and eye color. It stops at your nutrition needs, your exercise needs, how you handle stress, your cancer risk, disease risk. It goes on and on. So the study of genomics is essentially looking at what makes you different from everybody else. So you can stop treating nutrition and micronutrients and everything else in a vague sense that everybody should be doing the same thing and doing what you should be uniquely doing. That's essentially just to you.
Yeah. And as somebody who's coached thousands of people in their own nutrition, and you've probably gone through this evolution yourself of coaching of like, hey, we're just start with making good choices to macros, to measuring, now down to the genetic level. How have let's talk about what I call the hierarchy of nutrition coaching and where this kind of falls in line. So when you start working with most clients, I'm sure you get an idea of where they're starting at and what tool you need to pull out of the toolbox in order to properly coach them. What kind of motivated you to want to go down this road of genomics, and how have you applied it to your own clientele?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I've always been fascinated by the idea of genomics. This started when I was looking at nutrigenomics, which I believe, if I remember right, I first heard about over a decade ago through Precision Nutrition. I think it was something John Berardi mentioned offhand at one point, because it was something so infantile at the moment that there was no research on it really. It was kind of this emerging research nobody really knew about. It piqued my interest back then. But the real reason why I dived into it as I did was for my own reasons. So when I kind of left CrossFit, I wanted to understand what I would perform best at, where my unique biochemistry would have the best chance for greatness, let's say. And that was what really made me dive into the field as in depth as I did. Now, when I went into it, I had things that I was looking for, and then I got smacked with what I call the cosmic 2x4, with all of the other things that I learned in the process of that just blew me away. I mean, at that point, when I was learning all of that, I've already had PerformaFuel, which is the nutrition coaching company, for years and years, and doing what I thought was personalized nutrition, until I uncovered genomics and really dived into it and looked at all the newest available research and how much this field was emerging and growing. It completely changed what I thought was personalized nutrition, so much that I almost thought I was a fraud at some point, because I was calling PerformaFuel nutrition personalized nutrition. And to me at the time it was. Having gone through genomics, I can now say it definitely was not, because this can be way more personalized than it was. So it completely changes everything once you kind of get into this field. And I think when you're talking about the hierarchy of nutrition, I think at nutrition's base is these calories and macronutrients, right? I believe everybody who's even remotely considered nutrition or looked up anything about nutrition or followed anything nutrition related has probably dealt with either calories or macros. That is kind of the base level of nutrition. And some people will still say that that's personalized because you're following, a specific protein intake, let's say, or a specific amount of calories, let's say, based on your metabolism and your goals. But that is the very beginning stage of nutrition. As you get more advanced, you can get into things like micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, which are, I would say, completely unappreciated in most nutrition circles. And then, maybe supplements, maybe if it's an athlete or somebody that's overweight, there's different things that you can do for there. It starts to get a little bit more advanced. And then above that, you can start getting into things like blood work and looking at blood biochemistry, which I've always looked at for my clients, which gives you a little bit more insight. You can peek under the hood just a little bit to get some blood biometrics that can give you an idea of where this person is in their state of health, let's say, or even athletics. There's certain markers you can look at for that. But even when you're looking in the blood, which is still pretty advanced, I would say, to most nutrition practices that don't look at blood, it's getting there. But even that is still very basic, because the things that you're looking at in the blood, let's say you have high cholesterol that's circulating the blood. You don't know why your cholesterol is high. You still have to guess in terms of why your cholesterol is there. You have to look at your diet and think it's something to do with that, or your exercise. You're essentially just guessing. It gives you somewhere to go and somewhere to look into more, but you're still essentially just guessing. Genomics is now a technology where we can get down to the cellular level. We can literally go inside the cell and in the very deepest part of the cell, the nucleus, to uncover the DNA, which is literally how your body does everything that it does. We can uncover your blueprint, the instructions that your body was given on how to live and survive and carry out all of its functions, which then makes up everything in the blood, in your organs, and everything else. So the genomics is by far the most in-depth that you can get when it comes to nutrition. Well, when it comes to anything health related, really, but nutrition specifically. So I would say it is definitely, as of right now, the peak, the pinnacle of nutrition or personalization as it comes to nutrition and health.
Yeah. And you've mentioned to me like this before, like you only have to do this test once. Like it's you, right? It's you at the genetic level. And like, it's just really important information to know. And you can kind of you use the example of like, let's say we have high cholesterol. If I was talking to an MD, they'd probably put me on Lipitor, right? Like, but now we can kind of get into like, well, maybe why is it genetic that you have high cholesterol and can it be treated? Which we'll talk about supplementation, Amy, you specifically, and talk about kind of what we're doing to kind of work on these things that are happening in our body, because we understand what's actually going on. And so
just to talk actually on one of those points, because you just nailed it. That was actually my first client that I had with genomics. Was a client I was coaching for a while. He was in his upper 40s. He was a dentist. He was great health. We got him down to like 8% body fat. Like he was ripped, amazing health. His diet was great. His cholesterol was still through the roof. And the doctor rather, literally said that, hey, it's just genetic. You need to take cholesterol medication, and that's it. And I said, hey, why don't we try this crazy new thing called genomics and see if it works? And long story short, he had to push the doctor away to give him 3 months to try something on his own. The doctor said genomics would not work. It's bullshit, blah, 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 because they don't, this research is very new. They don't understand.
Devin, can you hear us?
No.
Kind of coming in and out a little bit. We'll just pause there real quick, and Devin, just let us know when you like keep talking so we know you're here. Hopefully we can get you back on here in a sec. Miranda, pivoting to you real quick. So somebody who coaches nutrition, obviously coaches a lot of different clients in nutrition. You recently went through this test yourself, and coming from a coach who uses a coach, and full disclosure for everyone on this video, all three of us, Amy, myself, and Miranda, use Devin as our nutrition coach. Miranda, what did you as someone who coaches in nutrition, what did you learn to appreciate about genomics, and what got you excited about the field of nutrition, and what you've learned about yourself and how it applies to your own nutrition? You want to just kind of give a quick little response to that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing, like I've always kind of had gut issues, and I've gone through like the carnivore diet, like Devin's worked with me on pretty much everything, and still like I've had like slight improvements, but in the grand scheme of things, like still kind of struggling. And so he kind of started talking about the genomic stuff. And for me, it was like, okay, I could not only learn more about that, but I could learn more about like what I'm at risk for like cancers in the future, how to improve like my performance, my just health in general. And I think too, like he was saying, that's obviously like the furthest level you can go with nutrition. And even if I'm just like learning about myself, I think I can also like learn certain things that I can take to my clients in regards to like the emotional side of things and like handling stress, and like, yeah, it's me specifically, but that could also kind of help other people too. So that's kind of what led me to it, I guess.
And for somebody who's still on the wait list, Devin keeps promising me that we're going to do this test sometime soon. Miranda, do you want to kind of go over like the big categories of like what this test actually covers? Because you brought up a lot of stuff. I think a lot of people are thinking like, oh, it's just going to tell me like 23andMe stuff, right? Like maybe I'm like for me, I'm like 90% Caucasian or something like that, like things that I already know. But like maybe you can talk a little bit about like what are those big buckets? Like how in depth is this actual test? Because I think Amy's going to speak to the dissertation she had to write in order just to get started. We'll get there in a second, but you want to just speak to those big buckets real quick?
Yeah, I mean, the test itself is like you do like a saliva swab or whatever, you swab your cheek, send it in. But you also fill out this questionnaire, which Amy and I were both joking about one day, I think, that it took us both about 2 weeks to fill it out, just because it's so in depth with all the questions. They're asking about like your childhood and like your current stresses and relationships and all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, when you think genomics, you immediately kind of think like science or whatever. At least that's what I thought of. But with filling out that questionnaire, you realize that like there's so much more to it. And for me personally, we've actually only been able to go through like my first half of my genomic test because it's like a 200-page report that you get back. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. Like we went over my bone health, we went over my performance category, which was really interesting, but also my emotional side. Like I think that's a big piece that people don't realize is included in this is, like things like your cortisol, and how that also can affect like your testosterone and estrogen levels. And just kind of like, at least for me, I learned a lot about my happy hormones, like my dopamine, things like that. And for me specifically, what's going to be the best method for me to like cope with stress based on my genes, which is huge. Like if you learn something like that, it's going to improve the quality of your life, So we still have other things to dive into, but for me, that was like the big piece that I was like, oh, we also can learn about the emotional side of things too, or like at least the stress management, which I think is a big thing for a lot of people in our world today,
Yeah. And Miranda, if you don't mind sharing with, obviously the audience, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, like, do you mind sharing some of the things that you were like, oh, wow, I'm surprised to learn this about me? Or maybe more importantly, like, I'm not surprised by that, but it clarifies a lot of things that go on in my life.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much an open book. I don't mind sharing, but for me, I learned that like I'm basically at an elevated cortisol level, so I'm kind of like always in this fight or flight mode. I also learned a lot that like I don't really, my body doesn't break down dopamine as well, so like I don't really have the same happy feelings as a lot of people, to kind of put it that way, which honestly felt almost like a relief for me, because sometimes I'm like, I should be happier. Like, what am I doing wrong? I have all of this stuff. Like, I enjoy my job. I enjoy like X, Y, and Z. And it's like, why am I not? And now learning that it's like more so because of my genes was kind of relieving.
Mhm.
I guess like it gave me a why or a reason that I may be feeling that way. Um, I also learned that I can't really break down like epinephrine or norepinephrine, and that I kind of always default to the same sort of stress response, like kind of like a panic mode. And for me, the best thing for me to do that Devin told me is to actually breathe. Like, as simple and cliche as it sounds, like I literally need to get more oxygen to my body. And so, but having that tool to like implement more things like box breathing or meditation, or, just inhaling and exhaling and actually being mindful about that, has been huge. And just too, that like with the whole dopamine thing, that I have to kind of like desensitize myself to things. So especially with, for me personally, working at a gym where it's like there's constantly music blaring, right? Like I'm constantly being stimulated. We're constantly stimulated on our phones. And so to desensitize myself to that, to take time to be quiet more, or be alone, or go for a walk without like having a podcast or music in my ears, things like that, that I can start implementing into my lifestyle to help me not be as stressed out.
Yeah, where did you land on the performance side? I'd be really interested in that. Like, what'd you learn about yourself? Are we all type 2, like muscle fibers? Just
That was probably the most interesting.
Honestly, yeah, Devin was like a little surprised. But to be honest, both of my biological parents are like pretty lean and slender, like kind of on that side.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't necessarily that I was like 100% towards endurance, but I also wasn't totally towards power either.
Interesting.
And I think that through a lot of my training, I was actually able to like change some of my muscle fibers to be more towards like fast twitch. But I mean, Devin can explain a lot more of the sciencey side. I don't fully understand all of it, but we did take away a couple key things that I was surprised of like that it's not beneficial for me to do eccentric work, which for most people it's great, but for me it actually produces too much damage where my central nervous system like takes way too long to recover from that.
Interesting.
So that was big, because I was actually doing eccentrics earlier in the week. And so I was like, oh, I need to stop that.
And Devin, to your
yeah.
point, like as a strength coach, I mean, it's dogma to do eccentric work, right? Like that's what we're told to believe all the time. And we would have never guessed that from Miranda, like not in a million years. Like
There was a couple of things about her test that were actually really surprising to me. But I haven't known her whole life. So once she like explained her parents and how she started with sporting and all that, actually did make sense. But just like from the outside looking in, there was a lot about hers that was pretty fascinating.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Miranda, do you want to talk to, I know it's kind of like an inside joke in the coaching staff, but your love for coffee and your caffeine, and you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I apologize to anyone that interacted with me the last week or two. No, I'm just kidding. But it was a big takeaway that I actually found out that caffeine is literally like toxic to my body. And I'm sure Amy can jump in on this too, because she had the same gene variant or whatever it is. And so that was a huge change that I had to make in my life. It was very challenging. I made it out the other side. But learning something like that, I mean, if I didn't take this test, I probably would have just kept going with caffeine. And caffeine is one of those drugs where it's like, you just keep taking more and more and more to try to keep getting that same effect of the stimulant, right? And so that was huge. My sleep has already improved from that 100%. And I also did just learn that I need to have more variety in my diet, which for me, I'm kind of just a person where I'm like, tell me what to eat, I'll eat it. Like, I'll eat the same thing every day. I don't care. I know if it hits my macros, it's easy. I don't have to think about it. But I actually learned that it's going to be better for me and like my gut and inflammation and all that to vary my foods. And I think that's honestly going to help me when I'm coaching my clients too through things like that. Cause I know a lot of people aren't like me. They don't want to eat the same thing every day. And so I'm looking forward to trying that out and implementing it and hopefully, like I said, using it to benefit my clients too.
That's exciting. Devin, do you want to speak a little bit about like when caffeine is toxic to the body, what it does? Like, is it just insane inflammation? Is it like what's actually going on, and how does that affect a high performer like Miranda when it comes to things like sport?
Yeah, man. So there's a couple of things there. Number one, the actual ergogenic effect of caffeine is highly dependent on your gene variant. So whether you can actually have a performance increasing effect from taking caffeine depends on how you metabolize caffeine. For the research that's done on caffeine, it's typically done on rapid metabolizers, which are people that can metabolize caffeine, get into the blood very quickly, and then utilize it for performance. This is why most pre-workouts say 30 minutes. Take this 30 minutes for your workout, blah, blah, blah. That's for rapid metabolizers. Then there's slower metabolizers, and then even slower metabolizers, even non-metabolizers, essentially. And the further down you get on that spectrum, the less effective caffeine will be for performance, and the more slightly neurotoxic caffeine can actually become because you cannot metabolize it properly, efficiently, or just enough in general, which has it built up into toxic metabolites, which then heavily taxes your system to clean up. And if you have
Oh no, Devin, you froze again.
It's that basement.
Yeah, that's okay. When he comes back in, Amy, let's rotate. Oh no, he's back. Okay, sorry, Devin, we missed that last part. You froze.
I don't know what's going on. My modem fell upstairs before on its own, so I think there's what is the last thing you heard there?
You basically said like if you can't metabolize it, it's a neurotoxin, and basically can cause a whole host of issues within individuals who can't do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just comes down to how you metabolize it, how fast you can metabolize, or even if you can metabolize it. Like there are non-responders to caffeine, which sounds crazy. And most people, even if they are a non-responder, wouldn't probably identify as a non-responder because of the placebo effect. They feel like they're having caffeine, so they're going to feel like they're getting something out of it, but they're actually not. Well, unless you consider the placebo effect getting something out of it. But biochemically, they're not degrading it or metabolizing it like somebody else. So, and you see this in the research. They've had research with caffeine where they've looked at the gene variants. They've actually separated everybody into their genetic variant and then measured caffeine's effects on performance. And it's night and day. The people who are rapid metabolizers, yes, awesome. It's great for performance. You can increase it by X amount. Slow metabolizers, it's either a zero increase or actually a detrimental effect on performance. So for an athlete who's competing, who's fighting for every second, that is the difference between winning and losing, for sure.
I think what's amazing about that is like, Miranda, you love coffee, like it's part of your lifestyle, and but we would have never been able, like Devin, like you doing this and not doing genomics, this probably would have been the last thing on your list to check in on, probably, right? If you were kind of like, I have no clue why this is causing this. Yeah.
Actually, even for Miranda, I literally remember us sitting at that whatever the hell that was, restaurant, and I was trying to we were looking at her stress panel, and I wasn't even thinking about caffeine. We were actually looking at her stress panel, and she had different genes like COMT and dopamine receptors, which resemble somebody with addiction issues. So I was actually asking her, I remember, I'm like, are you addicted to anything? Like, is there anything, and she's like, no. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, what about caffeine? She's like, oh. I was like, oh, shit. And that's what led us to caffeine. So it was actually the stress, emotional health genes that led us to even look at caffeine to begin with. So it was actually really fascinating. Yeah.
Amy, to pivot to you. So you're somebody who's gone through this test, and you've probably, Devin, correct me if I'm wrong, like we've done the full review with Amy up to this point, correct? For the most part?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So Amy, tell us a little bit about your story. Like, what did you learn about yourself? What was like eye-opening in terms of like, I had no idea. And then maybe what were some stuff where like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like that clarifies a lot of things.
Well, for those that don't know, me as being a member there, I'm a night shift nurse. So I've already got a lot of factors working against me in the sense of like my everyday life and job and just, you know, what that entails to work night shift and sleeping during the day. So, yeah, I guess like to, you know, kind of go off of that, caffeine was one of my things. And that was, I definitely, after talking to Miranda, didn't nearly drink as much as she did a day, but like definitely relied on caffeine to just like, I felt like get me going every day and like get me through the night. And so learning that like I don't metabolize caffeine like ever was really interesting. And again, so that's been like since April that I haven't had like any caffeine. I mean, I've, you know, had a day or two maybe where I've had a cup, and definitely have seen major improvements in my sleep immediately with that, like cutting the caffeine out. Because again, sleeping during the day is never quality sleep. So whatever kind of quality sleep I can get is a major improvement. And then what are some of the other things that
The vitamin D one I thought was super interesting. Yeah.
So vitamin D, like essentially I could be outside all day, as was like what Devin was telling me, and never absorb anything from the sun. So that was like a big one that he made sure to add like a ton to like my supplements that I'm taking now, which that's the next like step that Devin and I needs to like see some follow-up lab work to see, which I think I've definitely is probably an improvement because I actually recently got some vitamin D levels checked. And it's almost within range. It's still a little under,
but improvement, like a ton of improvement. That's awesome. Yeah. So it's working. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of like how Miranda was saying, like you literally, I didn't even know what I was honestly, you know, Devin kind of explains genomics, but I wasn't really sure like what is it really looking at? And so then to see that report and it's like looking at like cardiovascular health, bone health, cognitive health, you know, muscle, everything. I was like, oh, wow, like this is way more than I ever thought it was going to be. And so like kind of looking at the cognitive health, there was one gene and, you know, I don't remember, Devin might be able to tell you right off the top of his head what it was, but I remember him kind of like warning me. He's like, okay, don't freak out. But like, this is what we see when like people kind of have like bipolar disorders. And I was like, what? And it was just more of like a mental brain thing. And so, you know, like, he's like, this is more of like something you might see where like, maybe when you're really stressed, like how you emotionally react to it. And I was like, oh yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Like, I definitely can see, most people wouldn't like necessarily see me as an emotional person if you kind of like personally know me, because I'm very like good at kind of bottling that up and like not letting people see that. But like I definitely notice when I am stressed that I am a much more emotional person, and my emotions are very like on edge, and like it, you know, at the drop of a hat I can maybe start crying about something that is like, what am I crying about this for, you know, or something like that. So that was like really interesting to see. And so like just again, like he's able to like suggest like, oh, like these kind of supplements help with sort of that, you know, brain health and just like sort of controlling that sort of thing. And then, you know, just like things that to think about as you get older and sort of like dealing with your life. So it's like I have a high predisposition to like cardiovascular health and like or cardiovascular disease and like, you know, high cholesterol, and then I also have a very high predisposition to like osteopenia, which leads to osteoporosis. And so just like being mindful of that, especially as you get older, and like what does that look like and how do you maintain staying healthy and eating right and working out and sort of like to prevent that from happening. You know, if I totally change my lifestyle and I become a couch potato and decide to eat whatever I want to eat, you know, it's probably, that's going to be something that I would be facing one day. But knowing that, And as long as I work hard to, kind of just stay healthy and stay active and eat right, then hopefully I never have to deal with something like that as I get older.
I think what's amazing about that, Amy, is like maybe there's some markers that are starting to show up, like in like not just necessarily your blood work, lifestyle, whatever, but like there's a lot of things that you have a predisposition for that might not be showing up at all, that you're taking actionable steps to prevent, and you would have never known until probably way later on when they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you actually have cardiovascular disease. So this is incredibly preventative, which I think is super interesting. Devin, do you want to talk about, because you and Amy have been working on, let's call it Amy in a bottle, right? She has her own supplement that's like custom to her. Do you want to speak to like how we can take this another step to be treatable based on the results that we're getting in our tests?
Yeah, for sure. So when you go over something like a genomics test, and it's super overwhelming, as they'll probably agree to, there's a lot going on. And to fix this, there's a bunch of different interventions that we can do, but it mainly comes down to three different things. It's what can we do nutritionally, so what you're actually eating, what can we do from a supplemental point of view, so what do we need to take in addition to that, and then what can we do with your lifestyle. It essentially comes down to those three things on how we fix any of the problems that we see. And just to back up a second, because I get that response like Amy's kind of about like the bipolar things, like what the fuck? The most important thing about the genomic test is that everything that we look at and everything that we can see is treatable. There's not one gene variant in this test that we don't have any control over. And that's the beauty of genomics versus genetics. Genomics we can do something about. Genetics we can't. And it's just it sounds like a simple word change, but it means the difference for everything. So one of those interventions comes down to supplements. And the best way I can really describe this is it's kind of like fixing all the potholes on the road, so to speak. If you're trying to blast through that road and go cruise down and enjoy it and hit a $190, right? It's gonna be really fucking hard to do that. There's potholes everywhere. And when you do a supplemental change or we add those supplements in, we're essentially trying to fix those potholes. And I can give very quick examples. For instance, I'm pretty sure Amy in particular, her bone health panel was just blowing up like a Christmas tree. I mean, almost every variant you could have working against you for bone health, she pretty much had. So it was just a matter of time before her bones would degrade to osteopenia and then probably lead to osteoporosis later in life. And one simple one is a gene called BCMO1. I believe, Miranda, you might have had this too. I don't remember. But it basically converts beta carotene into retinol. And retinol has a very important function with the regulation of osteoclasts and osteoblasts, which regulate bone health, both the formation of the bone and the breaking down of the bone. And if you're supplementing with a multivitamin, it's most likely not the active form of retinol. So for her, getting the very specific form of retinol is very, 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 very important. And if she was relying on some vague general multivitamin, she probably wouldn't be getting enough of it, of what her body demands, but also the right form of it. So it would be almost entirely useless. And that's just one supplement.
Hey, Devin, I think your microphone cut out. Devin, can you hear me?
So many issues.
There we go.
Basement.
Devin, sorry, we missed like maybe the last 10 seconds. Do you mind repeating that?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I don't know why this is happening so much.
Long Island, dude. What's going on, man?
Crazy over here. You don't want to know. Right. What was the last thing you heard?
Yeah, so basically, you mentioned that like making sure we're getting the right like dosage in the most bioavailable form, and like most of these vitamins probably aren't providing that for. Yeah.
Just that one gene variant, which could be hugely important in getting the active form of it and the right amount of it, which you would not get in any typical vitamin that you would find. That's just one supplement, typically, or one mineral or vitamin rather, Jesus. But typically people need like 30 or 40 different supplements after reviewing their genomics. So to be able to put all of that into one powder where it's like you said, Amy in a bottle, essentially. Way more effective, way more financially better. I mean, you would waste so much money buying these things. So it's just hugely efficient. I mean, even for myself included, I treat myself like a lab rat. So I kind of do everything and anything. And for me, I was taking like 50 different supplements at one point. And to put it all into one powder, of course, you have to be smart with how you engineer that powder, because certain vitamins and minerals can compete for absorption. So some things you have to take separately, you have to dose it right, blah, blah, blah. But it still makes it a lot easier to fix the supplemental intervention, to do things where you can kind of combine everything in one. It's much more adherent to, because nobody's really going to follow the plan if it's too hard.
Yeah, and for most individuals who are probably spending like anywhere from $40 to $70 on whey protein and maybe a pre-workout and all this stuff, like what's the price point for Amy in a bottle?
Shit, I don't even remember. What was it? Probably 150 to 200 or something a month, maybe tops.
Yeah, because I got like 3 months plus worth, I think, and it was like $400.
And like hearing that price point and all the benefits that you're describing, Devin, where like all of this is like very specific for Amy's needs. There's nothing in there that that can't benefit her to some way in the right dosage that caters to her needs. Like, I think that's insane value. Like, that doesn't sound like, I would imagine like $1,000, like what I'd imagine for Amy in a bottle. I mean, so
a tub of protein and a basic multivitamin that doesn't do anything, and you're already at $100.
Yeah.
And it's, it's entirely pointless when you're getting 40 to 50 different supplements in the exact dose, in the exact form, and taking it at the exact time that your unique biochemistry at the cellular level wants. I mean, Jesus, like that's just stupid to me.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
This is such exciting stuff. And I know like Miranda, I mean, like she handles most of our nutrition clients. Like this is just like, what we do is we want to add value to people's life. And I think like this is obviously just the most detailed way of us taking care of our people, which I think is incredibly exciting. And so the impetus for all this for my community, as I speak to you, is like bringing Devin in for a seminar to be able to speak about this stuff and add value to your life. Devin, do you want to kind of go over the format of Saturday? What you're going to be going over, the things you're going to be reviewing, some practical things that people can take away from, because, I'm on a wait list and I'm sure the wait list is like a mile long, but if people are really interested in doing this, they can sign up. I know my wife is very interested in it, Devin, so I'll put her in touch with you, but like, kind of go over the agenda, and what are some practical things people can probably take away and start applying to their life.
For sure, man. And you're coming up soon, Thomas, so be ready. I promise we're getting there.
I'm ready, man. Let's do it.
You and Rob. So here's the deal, right? So I want to at least explain and dive into genomics a little bit more and give real practical examples and give very specific examples, because this is, as Miranda was saying before, I thought that was a really cool example of eccentric work, and going into transferring from one sport to another, and going from, something like CrossFit to strongman, and you're primarily going to be doing strength work now. And one of the, great strength works that, most people would do, or, like Chris Beardsley and Menno have put out a lot of research on doing heavy eccentrics. And it's probably arguably one of the best things you can do for strength adaptations. But because of her actin-3 gene variant, which was actually really surprising to me, she cannot actually create actin-3 or alpha actinin 3. And because of that, her recoverability after eccentric work is almost minimal or zero. She would almost fuck up her muscle tissue so much that it would take so long for her to recover, which is just, I mean, kind of insane, especially because I was the one programming eccentric work for her before that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as any good strength coach would, man, like, yeah, it's dogma. So yeah.
So even for me, reading was like, oh shit. But this is what happens when you get down to the cellular level and you actually can understand things. So, I want to give people information like that. That's very interesting, because there is a lot of people out there that do have these 23andMe type tests, and the way that they give you the information is almost completely useless, but they do at least test some of the gene variants. And I can teach people how to get into that raw data. so that they can actually look at a gene and look at an RS number and look at the variant. And I can explain some things that they can take away just from that. So if some people have that kind of data, they can bring that and actually get a lot of information out of it.
Okay.
Like similar to what I just said to Miranda. And in addition to that, there's something cool that we can do that everybody can do that comes to the seminar, which is actually get their blood type. Now, there's little test kits that we'll have where people can actually do that right then and there to get their blood type, or they may know it already, which saves the test. But the blood type is interesting because there's a lot of blood type dieting bullshit out there, and there's a lot of, rightfully so, arguments against it. But what people failed to realize is that blood type dieting is just a very, very low barrier to entry to genomics. It's essentially a baby step to try to guess gene variants. Because if you have this blood type, you most likely have some of these gene variants. It's obviously not as nearly as indirect or as, accurate as the genomic test, but it does give you some insight as to what possible gene variants you have. And then you can take different protocols and try different protocols for yourself to see if it feels better or for worse based on that. So even for people who don't have any type of raw data or testing, you can still walk away with some really interesting personalized recommendations based off your blood type, which is kind of cool because it's, something everybody can do right then and there. And they'll walk away with some useful information. Because the one thing that's, as powerful as genomics is, that's also its kind of the tough point about it, is that because it's so in depth, it requires so much time. And this is why I have a wait list that's 6 to 7 months out right now, because it takes me, I can only do maybe 1-2 people tops per month, because it just takes a lot of time and effort to go through all these different gene variants and give somebody protocols based off of it. So the fact that you can kind of come in and get something out of that is actually pretty damn cool. So I think it will be really, really practical for a lot of people to walk away with a really heightened sense of personalized nutrition and what that means for them. And not even just nutrition, but also supplements that would be interesting for them or important for them, as well as lifestyle stuff. I think Miranda was talking about this before, but the emotional health, the mental health aspects of this stuff is just phenomenal. I could explain what a certain gene variant feels like, and half the room will probably raise their hand. And, there's protocols and lifestyle interventions that you can do for that to help. And a lot of people, especially in the, emotional health area, a lot of people just don't realize that they react the way they do because of how they're built biochemically. And there is something you could do about that. Like a lot of times, at least for me, I would always hear that, depression being a chemical imbalance seemed so foreign that it was like, oh, well, that's crazy. It's not me. Like that's, that sucks for them. They probably need medication, but it's not me. I don't have a chemical imbalance. I would know if I did, right? It sounds so foreign. Now, after going through genomics and looking at it, it's not if you have a chemical imbalance, it's what chemical imbalance you have. That's how powerful this stuff is. So, even when it comes to that, like there's things I could just explain and describe that people would sync with and instantly know that that's them. And there's things that you can do about it. And they're not harmful either way. There's supplements that you can take that could help it. But even if you don't have that variant, it won't matter. For some things. For some things, it's not the case. But either way, people will walk out of there with a much more personalized understanding of who they are and what they could do. That's well above, calories, macros, and what vitamin to take.
Yeah. No, this is.
I will say too. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Miranda. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, I think one of the biggest points that Devin just made is that there's always something that you can do about it. Like, at least for me, when I was kind of sharing my caffeine withdrawal experience with some of the members at our gym, the biggest hesitancy I've heard from maybe not wanting to take the genomic test or dive into that is some people almost kind of with the mindset of I'd rather not know. But I think in this scenario, the biggest thing is like what Devin said is like, there's something you can do about it. It's not like you're finding out that the exact day you're going to die or how exactly you're dying or anything like that. I can understand not wanting to know that information, but I think it's huge to like, one, have the information, but also know like, okay, Devin's going to give you something that you can do about it, or a supplement that you can take. Like there is a solution to like work through it, you know? So if anyone out there is like listening and has that hesitancy, I think they can take comfort in the fact that like, it's not like a death sentence. You're not like screwed forever. Like you can, you know, help yourself out through this, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, like, I know for you, for Miranda, like, I'm sure for it clarified a lot of things. It added to your performance as an athlete. I know Amy, probably great to know like things that we need to keep our eyes open for, especially like as, you know, you and Jason look to start a family and do a lot of cool stuff. Like I would just want to know that personally. If I have a precursor for a certain cancer, like I got a son, I got a wife, like I want to know that stuff, you know, and start taking care of it now. I think it's all really, really important stuff. So any last thoughts, you guys, before we jump off? Anything you want to add to the discussion, anything you want to say to our members while we're on?
I'll actually piggyback on what you just said, because like I spoke about before, when I got into genomics, I wasn't even concerned with health. I was all about performance and uncovering me biochemically and all that. And one of the things I found was that I was at an extremely increased risk for prostate cancer, which did not run in my family. Nobody would thought about prostate cancer. It was not in my mind at all. But just because of how I detoxifies estrogen in my body led to a really steep, probably 5 to 10 times increased risk for prostate cancer. But with just 2 supplements, I was able to completely evade that. So, I mean, it's insane to possibly have put 10 years on my life from taking 2 little supplements daily. I mean, you can't put a price on that. It's
I would just add that, like, working with someone like me, I mean, obviously you can kind of see by looking just at Devin, he's pretty much a more elite athlete. And then everyone that knows Miranda obviously knows that she's doing a lot of really strong things lately. Like, you know, I would consider myself the average athlete, right? Like I'm just looking at this to like you kind of said, Tommy, just to know a little bit more about myself and what does that mean? And like, as I get older, like, what does my life look like moving forward? And so it's still super beneficial as someone who's not even this like elite athlete that's training for something or like looking to improve performance, which, I mean, sure. Yeah, of course I am, you know, with my workouts and everything, but it's more of just how do I better, control myself and my health in a more also natural way, you know, so I'm not taking prescription meds later in life. And, you know, if there's anything like that I can avoid, even being a nurse, I wholeheartedly believe in medicine and the power of like our healthcare and like what it can do to save lives. But I am definitely much more, my natural instinct is like, how can I naturally heal myself? How can I naturally help myself so that I'm not in a hospital depending on, you know, these meds and, you know, chemicals and drugs that are developed in a lab somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great point. Like I said, Devin, like my wife wants to do it. And I think I can imagine us sitting down as a family and reviewing our results and doing planning around it, right? Like, hey, you understand me. Maybe you understand why I am the way that I am. And it might explain a few things and add some more happiness to our marriage. You know, we're going to go over all that stuff. So
I've gotten a lot of couples who've done it, and I'll like explain something about like the husband. They'd be like, huh? See?
Yeah. At least I can say it's not my fault. Well, it is my fault, but I'm working on it. Yeah. So.
That's funny.
So awesome, guys. Well, thanks again for hopping on here and taking the time. And for all the community out there, again, this is August 28th. Miranda and I will have a link up here soon for signups. We want to be able to add value to your life in a very personal way. It's kind of the way our gym is moving in general, is just to be able to add a lot more personalized value to your training, to your health, to your nutrition, whatever it is. And so just want to say thanks again to Devin for taking 2 hours out of your day to do some recordings. And we're excited to have you down here in a couple of weeks. And Amy, thank you. I know, do you have to work tonight, Amy? Yep. So I really appreciate it. And obviously, Miranda, as always, thank you for hopping on and making yourself available. So
Yeah, you're welcome.
all right, you guys, take care.
Bye.
See you soon.